Single dad saw a little girl searching trash on Christmas Eve. What he discovered about her story left him completely stunned. On Christmas Eve, one man's quiet, lonely routine was about to change forever. Daniel Carter thought the night would be just another shift, another walk through the cold silence he'd grown used to. But what he saw behind his apartment building would change two lives in ways neither could have imagined. The December wind was sharp, slicing through the streets as if the air itself carried blades. Daniel pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders, his keys jingling in his pocket as he stepped outside. It was late, 11:50 p.m. Christmas Eve. For him, it was just another night, just another job at the security firm where silence had long been his only companion. But as Daniel walked toward his car, something caught his attention. A faint movement near the dumpster. He slowed, squinting into the shadows. At first, he thought it was an animal, maybe a stray cat, white mane, and his eyes adjusted, his breath caught in his chest. It wasn't an animal. It was a child. A little girl, no older than 7, was digging carefully through the rubbish. Her hands, red and trembling from the cold, picked through cartons and wrappers with the grim precision of someone who had done this many times before. Before we continue, please subscribe to this channel. It will help videos like this reach more people. Thank you. Back to the story. Before Daniel could even think, his body was moving. He stepped closer, his voice low, cautious. "Hey there," he said gently, not wanting to scare her. The girl's head snapped up. Wide brown eyes, filled with fear, locked on him. She clutched a half-eaten sandwich to her chest like it was treasure, her tiny body tense, ready to run. "It's okay," Daniel said softly, raising one hand slowly in reassurance. "I'm not going to hurt you." She stayed frozen, studying him with a suspicion far too old for her fragile frame. She wore an oversized purple jacket, frayed at the seams, drowning her small figure. Her dark hair fell in messy strands across her pale, hollow cheeks. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Daniel asked carefully, kneeling slightly to seem less threatening. The silence stretched until finally, her lips moved. "Lila?" "Lila," Daniel repeated softly, his voice breaking the cold night air. "That's a beautiful name." "I'm Daniel." His heart clenched as he looked at her, this tiny child, alone in the freezing night. "Are you looking for something in particular?" he asked. Her grip tightened on the sandwich. Her answer was barely above a whisper. "Food." The single word hit Daniel like a blow to the chest. No child should be searching for scraps in the dark. Not on Christmas Eve. Not ever. "Where are your parents, Lila?" he asked softly. Her eyes shimmered, her lips trembling as she lowered her gaze. I don't have any," she whispered, her voice breaking. And in that moment, something stirred inside Daniel, something he thought had been buried forever. The instinct to protect. The heart of a father. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as Lila's words settled in the cold air. No parents. No one. The thought alone was unbearable. He looked at her trembling hands, at the way she guarded that half-eaten sandwich as though it was life itself, and his chest ached. "Lila," he said gently, "you can't stay out here in the cold. It isn't safe." But the girl only shook her head, stepping back slightly. Her wide eyes darted from the alley to him, like a cornered bird ready to take flight. "I won't hurt you," Daniel assured her, keeping his voice low, steady. He raised his palms in surrender. I just want to help." The wind howled through the alley, carrying flakes of snow that clung to her hair. She looked so small, so fragile, standing there in a coat that could barely keep out the chill. Daniel's mind raced. He didn't want to frighten her further, but he couldn't just walk away. He remembered nights of his own, long ago, when he had felt alone. The kind of loneliness that ate at your soul. He couldn't leave her to face that. Not tonight. I have some food, he said softly, pointing toward his car park by the curb. It's warm. And I promise, if you don't feel safe, you can leave. No tricks. Lila hesitated. Her fingers trembled as she held the sandwich tighter, her gaze fixed on him with untrusting eyes. For a long moment, Daniel thought she would run. But then, with a small, almost invisible nod, she agreed. Relief washed over him. He gave her a soft smile, careful not to move too quickly. Good girl. Come on, let's get you out of this cold. Together, they walked toward his car, her tiny steps hesitant but steady. He opened the passenger door for her, and she climbed in, curling up against the seat like she was ready to vanish into it. Daniel slipped into the driver's seat, glancing at her from the corner of his eye. She was staring at the dashboard, clutching that sandwich as if letting go might mean losing the last thing she had. Don't worry, he said gently as he started the engine. The heater hummed, warm air filling the small space. You're safe now, Lila. For the first time that night, her shoulders dropped just a little, and though her lips didn't form a smile, the tightness in her eyes softened. And in that fragile moment, Daniel knew, this meeting wasn't chance. Their lives had crossed for a reason. The drive back to Daniel's apartment was quiet, broken only by the low hum of the heater and the occasional sound of Lila's sniffles as she held onto the sandwich. Daniel kept stealing glances at her, this little girl who seemed so lost, so fragile, yet so strong to have survived nights like this. When they reached his building, Daniel parked and turned to her. Come on, kiddo. Let's get you inside where it's warm. Lila hesitated, her small fingers gripping the door handle tightly. Fear flickered in her eyes, the fear of stepping into the unknown. You don't have to be afraid, Daniel said softly. I'll make you some hot chocolate, and if you want, you can leave whenever you like. I promise. That promise seemed to ease her worry. Slowly, she opened the door and followed him inside. The apartment was modest, a little too neat, as if no one really lived there. Years of solitude had stripped it of warmth, but tonight, something shifted the moment Lila stepped inside. The silence that once felt heavy now seemed different. Daniel helped her out of the oversized jacket and draped a blanket around her shoulders. She sank into his couch, her small frame nearly disappearing beneath the fabric. Hungry? He asked gently. She gave the faintest nod. In minutes, Daniel set a plate on the coffee table, a grilled cheese sandwich and a steaming mug of cocoa. Lila's eyes widened at the sight, her lips parting in awe. Go ahead, Daniel encouraged. She picked up the sandwich with trembling hands and took a bite. Her face softened as the warmth filled her belly. For a moment, she almost looked like the child she was supposed to be, innocent, happy, safe. Daniel sat across from her, watching quietly. He didn't want to overwhelm her with questions, but he couldn't help asking gently, Lila, how long have you been out there? Her chewing slowed. She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. A while. Daniel's heart ached at the vagueness. He could see in her eyes that the truth carried more pain than words could hold. It's all right, he said softly, not pressing further. You don't have to talk about it now. She nodded slowly, sipping the hot chocolate, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something stirring inside him, something he thought he'd lost forever. A sense of purpose. A reason to care again. And as he watched Lila curl up against the couch, finally drifting into a fragile sleep, Daniel whispered to himself, "You're safe now. I've got you." He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain, his life would never be the same. Morning light crept through the blinds, spilling across the living room. Daniel stirred awake from the armchair, his neck stiff from sleeping upright. His eyes fell on the couch, where Lila was still curled beneath the blanket, breathing softly, her small face calm for the first time since he'd seen her. For a moment, Daniel simply watched. Something in his chest tightened, a feeling he hadn't let himself feel in years. Care. He rose quietly, making breakfast. The smell of eggs and toast filled the apartment, and soon, Lila's eyes fluttered open. She sat up slowly, blinking against the light. "Good morning," Daniel said softly, placing a plate on the table. "Thought you might be hungry." She hesitated before climbing off the couch. Her steps were cautious, but the look in her eyes wasn't as guarded as the night before. She ate quietly, and for the first time, Daniel noticed something more than fear in her gaze, a flicker of trust. Between bites, her soft voice broke the silence. "Why are you helping me?" The question stopped Daniel cold. He set his coffee cup down, searching for an answer. "Because no one should be alone like that. Especially not you." Her lips pressed together, as if she wasn't sure whether to believe him. But she didn't argue. Over the next few days, Daniel found his quiet, empty life shifting. Lila's laughter, faint at first, began to echo in the apartment. She sat at the kitchen counter while he cooked, humming softly. At night, she listened as he read old storybooks, her head nodding off before the last page. But even as warmth began to return to his home, the outside world couldn't be ignored. Daniel knew people would ask questions. A neighbor had already glanced curiously when he walked in with Lila. And deep down, he knew the law would never let things stay this simple. Still, in those stolen moments, as he watched her smile shyly over a plate of pancakes, Daniel realized something. He wasn't just helping Lila survive. She was helping him remember what it meant to live. It didn't take long before the world noticed. One chilly afternoon, there was a knock at Daniel's door. When he opened it, two figures stood there, a stern-looking social worker and a uniformed officer. Lila, who had been drawing at the table, froze the moment she saw them. The color drained from her face. "Mr. Carter?" the social worker asked. "Yes," Daniel replied cautiously. "We've received reports about a child in your care. We need to ask some questions." Daniel's chest tightened. He glanced back at Lila, who was clutching her drawing with trembling hands. The fear in her eyes told him everything. She thought she was about to be taken away. "She's safe here," Daniel said firmly. "She was out in the cold, alone. I couldn't just leave her." The officer exchanged a look with the social worker. "Sir, we understand. But legally, this child cannot remain here without proper guardianship." Daniel's heart pounded. Every fiber of him wanted to shield Lila from them. She stood slowly, her small voice trembling. "Please, don't take me away." Those words pierced Daniel deeper than anything else ever could. He knelt beside her, placing his hands on her shoulders. "I won't let anything bad happen to you, Lila. I promise." But promises weren't always enough. Within days, Daniel found himself sitting in a courtroom, the cold walls echoing with the sound of decisions that could shape both their lives. The social worker laid out the facts, the officer testified about procedure, and for a moment, it felt like the system didn't care about what Lila truly needed. Daniel rose to speak, his voice shaking but determined. "She's not just some case file. She's a little girl who deserves love, safety, and a home. I found her in the freezing cold, starving. And I'll fight with everything I have to make sure she never goes through that again." Across the room, Lila sat with her legs swinging nervously from the bench. Her eyes never left Daniel. And in them was something unspoken, something powerful, trust. The courthouse was quieter than Daniel expected that Tuesday morning, yet his heart was pounding loud enough to drown out everything else. He sat in the hallway outside the family courtroom, his leg bouncing restlessly. Beside him sat Lila, her small hand tucked into his, grounding him. She wore her favorite purple dress, not the ragged jacket he had first seen her in, but something new, bright, and perfectly her. Daniel leaned down and whispered, "Are you nervous?" "A little," she admitted, swinging her legs beneath the bench. Then she paused, thinking carefully. "I think I'm excited nervous. Like when you're about to open a present you really, really want, but you're scared it might not be what you hoped for." Daniel smiled. "And what are you hoping for?" She looked up at him with eyes that could melt the hardest heart. "For you to be my real dad forever. Not just until someone decides I have to go somewhere else." His throat tightened, but he squeezed her hand firmly. "That's what I'm hoping for too." When their names were called, Daniel and Lila rose together, walking hand in hand into the courtroom. Mitchell, Daniel's lawyer friend, was waiting inside along with the social worker who had been overseeing Lila's case. The guardian ad litem sat at the front, representing Lila's interests. And presiding over it all was Judge Patricia Hernandez, a woman who had spent years listening to complicated stories about family, loss, and hope. She adjusted her glasses, scanning the file before her. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice firm but kind, "when we first met 6 months ago, you were a single man with no experience raising children, requesting emergency guardianship of a little girl you had known for less than 24 hours. I'll admit, I had my concerns." Daniel swallowed hard, but Judge Hernandez wasn't finished. "However, the reports I've received since then from Dr. Richards, from Lila's teachers, and from the social workers assigned to this case all paint the same picture, a man who has dedicated himself completely to healing and caring for a child who desperately needed both." She looked directly at Lila. "And young lady, I understand you have something you'd like to say." Lila stood, her small frame straightening with surprising confidence. She clasped her hands together and took a breath. "Your Honor, Mr. Daniel saved my life. Not just that first night when I was cold and hungry, but every single day since then. He helps me with my homework, he braids my hair, even when it comes out a little crooked," she said, sparking soft laughter in the room. "He stays with me when I have bad dreams, and he always keeps his promises. I know he's my real dad because he chose me. And he keeps choosing me every single day." For a moment, the courtroom was silent. Judge Hernandez's eyes softened, and a faint smile touched her lips. "Thank you, Lila. That was very brave." She turned back to her papers, then raised the gavel. "By the power vested in me by the state, I hereby grant the petition for adoption. Daniel Carter, you are now the legal father of Lila Carter." The gavel came down with a decisive thud. Daniel felt his knees buckle with relief and overwhelming joy. He looked down at Lila, who was already grinning so wide he thought her face might split in two. "We did it," she whispered. Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he scooped her into his arms. "We did it," he confirmed, holding her tight against his chest. For the first time in years, the weight he had carried since Sarah and the baby's death finally lifted. That evening, the two of them celebrated the only way that felt right, with Chinese takeout in their living room, their little tradition for special moments. Between bites of noodles and dumplings, Lila pulled out something from her backpack. "I made this for you," she said shyly, sliding a drawing across the table. It showed two people holding hands in front of a house, with the words "My Family" written carefully across the top. Daniel felt his chest tighten as he examined the picture. The house had yellow curtains like the ones they had picked out together, and the garden was filled with flowers Lila had insisted they plant in the spring. The two figures in the drawing were smiling, their hands joined. "This is us," she said softly. "Is that okay?" Daniel blinked back tears, his voice thick. "It's more than okay, sweetheart. It's perfect." He hung the drawing on the refrigerator in the place of honor. Then, pulling her gently into his lap, he said, "You know, I used to think families were only the people you were born to. But you've taught me that the best families are the ones we choose. The ones we build with love, patience, and commitment." Lila rested her head against his chest. "Thank you for not walking away that night," she whispered. Daniel kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for letting me stay." That night, as he tucked her into bed, Daniel looked around their little home, no longer empty, no longer silent. For the first time in 3 long years, he felt whole again. 2 broken souls had found each other on the coldest night of the year. And together, they had built something neither had ever imagined possible, a family, born not of blood, but of love and choice. Sometimes the most extraordinary Christmas gifts aren't wrapped in shiny paper or tied with bows. Sometimes, they come disguised in tattered jackets, searching through trash, waiting for someone to see their worth. Daniel had seen Lila. He had chosen her. He had stayed. And that had made all the difference. Friends, if this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, if it reminded you of the power we all have to change someone's life with a simple act of kindness, please don't just watch and walk away. Tell me where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button and join our Emotional Tales family.